Ya compré, ya repetí mi pedido de este, Felipe, para estar prevenidos y cada vez que usted detecte que los suyos necesitan refuerzo, antes de que se rompan, me los da. Antes. Pero ya, así lo quiero siempre. Quedó bien bonito con las orillas y todo. Pero sí le encargo. Este todavía da para un poquito más. Pero sí está perfecto. ¿Cuándo va a ir a dejar todo, Felipe? Ah, quedamos que era el jueves, ¿verdad? Y Mario está citado para mañana. Lo voy a recordar. Perdóneme usted. Ah, sí, hay que apurarnos antes del cortinaje y que ya quede un poco más arreglado todo. Pero para pianito. ¿Y qué? Y hay que sacarlo, pero eso hasta el 23.
Por eso digo, tú vas a hacer una vez el cortinaje.
Ajá. Ajá.
O sea, ya tenés
Ajá. Pero arregla un poco, ¿no? O sea, en estos días también.
ya para después.
Por favor, sí. No, sí entiendo que no ha habido retraso de su parte. Pero sí, o mientras más pueda. No es tanto vaciarla de arriba, sí me importa, pero necesita acomodarla de abajo. No sé qué le vaya a convenir más, porque tiene muchas cosas chiquitas la de arriba. Siento que... No, pero deje todo bonito ahora sí, Felipe, todo bien bonito. Y insisto, en su área de la entrada hacia adentro, ahí vamos a trabajar. Una buena área de trabajo y lo chiquito, no sé cómo se le vaya a poner. Hay 5 anaqueles, ahí puede tener cosas muy prácticas. Hola. Excelente, todo excelente. Excelente, Zipa. Excelentísimo. Ya, desde sí. Ya te platicaré mañana al rato, pero sí, brutalmente bien, pero sí súper temprano, súper todo. Excelente.
Sí, podemos ir.
Voy a empezar. Bye.
Para ir empezando el segundo panel.
Can we start the second panel, please? Would you please have your seats?
Les pedimos por favor tomar asiento.
We kindly ask you to please have your seats.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Es un gusto estar aquí.
Thanks so much. My name is Diana Fimbres, and it's my pleasure to be here. And I come from Polaris, a hotline against trafficking in persons labor. We will continue with the conversation, but before that, I would like to thank Laura and Manuela from IPSE, who are there doing the interpretation service. Let's give them a round of applause. And we would like to recognize. We would like to thank those who are following us. In this next panel, we will be speaking about tools and innovative mechanisms and intercultural mechanisms to prevent and address trafficking in persons and forced labor in the agricultural sector. And on behalf of Polaris, it is my pleasure to moderate this conversation, considering considering the work we've done and how we have contributed to data analysis and compilation. In this panel, we have some guests, very high-level guests. Mary Ellison, labor attaché from the U.S. Embassy in Mexico. We have Carmen Pedraza from the Institute for Human Rights and Business. We have Margarita Nemecio from CECIG and the Red Nacional de Jornaleras y Jornaleros, and Merari Picazo from the International Organization of Migrations. Similar to the previous session, we will start with the triggering questions, and they will have 10 minutes each in order to present their comments, to make their presentations. And then we're going to open the dialogue again. We will open the floor to your comments. The idea is to have these spaces, so to create a dialogue. So we want you to take this time to ask your questions and to also trigger new ideas. So this is something very important. So we're going to start with the triggering questions, which are, Mari, can we start with you? I will repeat and I will ask the questions. Which are the tools and innovative mechanisms have been identified in order to prevent trafficking in persons and forced labor? What is the value of the intercultural approach of all these tools and mechanisms? Which are the existing challenges, speaking about the inclusion of all people in the prevention effort of these violations of rights?
Pues muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Diana. And good morning, everyone. Yes, it is still good morning.
Todos y todas.
Good morning, everyone.
Mi nombre es Mary Ellison.
My name is Mary Ellison. I am a labor attaché at the U.S. Embassy. And I work at the Labor Department, and it is my honor to be here with you all. Lots of people that I've seen before, that I've known, and I am very pleased. I am very pleased to be here to speak about this very important topic for Mexico and for the United States. I believe, and as someone said, I was telling someone, is that I feel today we are facing a point in time when there is much more attention paid to this topic. There is much more energy, and there's lots of wisdom in you and in many others, and there is a big wish to improve working conditions for people at the agricultural sector. And this is why it is my honor to be here with you and to share our ideas. The ideas of the U.S. government. I will be speaking about our tools and our mechanisms, what we have developed together with the Mexican government and together with other governments in the last 2 years. And some of the challenges with respect to the intercultural approach. I do believe that we always say at the U.S. Embassy, we always say that we are neighbors. We are neighbors, we are friends, and we are partners as well, the two countries. And with the Canadian government as well, we are a region. We are a region. We are the North American region, and we, as a region, we are the role model. We are the role model for the regions in the world, and this is why it is so important to be here. I have my slides in my PowerPoint, so we will now go to the second screen. A very tiny font size, but I believe I will not stay in this slide because we have already heard the organization, the International Labor Organization, and the international standards. So I only would like to say that my international migrant workers, They represent almost 5% of the labor force all over the world. 5%, 5%. And this is why we are here, because we know that these workers, all these workers, male and female workers, they receive salaries and wages which are much lower than other male and female workers, and they work in different working conditions, and the health services are difficult topics, and this is an issue. There is discrimination, there are gender inequalities, and we have lots of work to do, lots of work to do. I will not be speaking about all these agreements because we have heard a lot about this, but can I have the next slide, please? As you know, we have the trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And this is something that we are using a lot. As you have listened to, we are using this treaty, this agreement, in order to actually promote and to push the labor rights of all workers, not only of U.S. Male and female workers, but the same here, specifically here in Mexico. And this is the very first agreement. This is the very first free trade agreement that has specific provisions focused on the protection of migrant workers. Why am I saying this? Because we know that workers, workers, migrant workers work a lot in the agricultural sector in Mexico, as well as in the United States. Several people have been speaking about the H2 program. The next one, please. President Biden and the Vice President Harris with them, we have recognized, and I believe this is the very first time in the history of the United States, at least in my life, this is the very first time that we are actually taking a regional approach. We're speaking about labor migration. We also know there are many fundamental causes that push migration or cause this migration, and we should also remember that there are many vulnerabilities in this process. We are accepting that we need to promote political conditions, economic and security, social conditions, as well as environmental conditions, so that people can have a productive life with peace and with dignity in their countries of origin, as well as in the countries of destination. We are fully committed to protect security and dignity of all the refugee migrants and asylum applicants, as well as people with no nationality. Now, I would like to give you a timeline. I would like to tell you the progress we make speaking about migrant workers and the equal contracting process. And as someone said in the first panel, in the year 2022, a year and a half ago, we had the Summit of the Americas, and there we had the Declaration of Los Angeles. And after that, and all the conversations about labor migration, and the Labor Department, and the State Department, and the USAID, they produced this guide on ethical recruitment and equal contracting. And this is making our position as government clearer with respect to the international standards. and the international standards of the International Labor Organization. And I will be speaking about this in more detail. And then we saw it was going to be a good idea to have a memorandum, to have an MOU with the Mexican government. So this is what we decided. And we started to develop this memorandum of understanding. And we also signed this MOU last year. And since that moment, we've been developing an action plan, and we have had different achievements. We have made different achievements in the last 6 months, almost a year, almost 1 year. And I will be speaking about these actions as well in detail.
Pues aquí solamente mencionar que la declaración.
I would like to say that the declaration was signed by 21 countries in Latin America. I think you know this. And this was very important because we wanted to take a more hemispheric type of approach. And as I already said, we made our guide on how to have an equal contracting process for temporary migrant workers. And you can look for this guide. And if you log in into internet, if you go to internet, it is public information. And we produced this guide to clarify some key aspects such as the regulation of infrastructure as well as contracting processes, how to enforce fundamental rights of workers, how to make sure there is transparency and access to better working conditions. And in the guide we also describe those measures that supply chain people can take in order to prevent abuse in the supply chain. The next one, please. And as I said, after the 9th Summit of the Americas, we started and we created a work group on labor mobility to develop this memorandum of understanding. And we also signed the memorandum of understanding in January last year. I will speak about the objectives of this memorandum. We're still working on this. We have meetings with the Mexican government. We also meet with STPS and ANM. We meet with the different parts of the Mexican government every 3 months, more or less. But the objectives is to strengthen bilateral cooperation, and specifically speaking about the visa program for H2 temporary workers, and also to enforce labor rights and anti-discriminatory rights for foreign workers. And we also would like to underscore the importance of an equal type of contract, decent jobs, to facilitate availability of temporary agricultural and non-agricultural opportunities, and to also work with the National Job Service. And since that time, we have had our plan, we have had a work plan in order to implement this memorandum of understanding, and we have taken some key actions. I believe we haven't heard government officers, but we have the STPS, the Ministry of Labor representative. I believe they will be speaking about important aspects, specifically the ethical process of contracting But from our side, and on our side, I believe we have done important things. First, we introduced the salary return program. In other words, and this is for migrants. In other words, we made a commitment to protect the migrating workers before, during, and after the work process in the United States. And the salary return program happens after the process. It speaks about the process before, and this is going to be our guide on recruitment, ethical recruitment. But this will come later. And this is to refund the delayed or backlog salaries that were paid to the government, and they should be given to the Mexican workers, those who had the H2A visa holders. So we have this program. We are still in the process of testing the pilot program to see if it will work. And if it will work okay in the case of all these people and for these people. And if you have comments today or after today, I will be very pleased to listen to your opinions and perspectives. The next one plays last August. We also introduced our new site, trabajadormigrante.gov, and this is a site that is published in both in English as well as in Spanish, and we have lots of information. We have videos, and they speak about the different questions that workers have, both male and female migrating workers, and this is why we can speak about discrimination, harassment, recruitment. We also have one video on how to access toilets in the agricultural setting, because sometimes this is a very complicated topic. We also have information about labor trafficking, trafficking in persons, forced work, and we also have information about who can be in touch with the workers if they have a problem, for example, or if they have a question. We are collaborating with the Mexican government, for example, with the Mexican consulates, which are in the United States, because they are a point. They are one point place where Mexican people can go and be helped by the Mexican consulates. But we also have a line on our side to receive complaints and to receive information. We also have information in this website on how to file a complaint, for example. The next one, please. We are also doing some improvements to our H2 program. We have different regulations, and we have a new work team that we introduced a year ago, and we're still working on it so that we can actually improve the regulations. And these two H2A and H2B programs, because, for example, we know that, yes, of course, we have had problems. It is not a secret. And if you go to our site, to our Department of Work, you're going to see that every Department of Labor, you're going to see that every day there are news about inspections we make. For example, in my state, Wisconsin, we have had cases of forced labor exploitation of migrants. For example, meat packers, for example. And we have also found this. We have also found this in those plantations that produce, or ranches that produce milk. We have seen cases like this, and the Labor Department always on our side in the United States. They are always paying attention to all these different cases so that it is possible to make progress and to protect and enforce the labor rights of these workers, to improve their salaries and to follow up these cases, to follow these cases up. And I believe this is also important because the program is not perfect. We are improving this program. Thanks to a lot of information from organizations like the ones you represent. The next slide, please.
Pues en conclusión, sabemos y estamos de acuerdo con la idea que todos los migrantes.
So we know that all the migrants, we know that they deserve respect and dignity in every step in their journeys. And we made a commitment to make sure their labor rights are being enforced and to have access to mechanisms to file complaints and to file complaint about rights being infringed. We are here. We're here to continue with the collaboration, and as I said at the beginning, we're very grateful with the organizers of this forum. Thanks to all of you. We know it is not easy to work on this. To see the different challenges, and we have many areas of opportunity. We have the names of all the labor attaches in Mexico. It is 5 of us, 3 here in Mexico City, plus 1 in Tijuana and another 1 in Monterrey. And we are here to help you and to collaborate with you. We have also technical assistance programs to make progress and to do what we're expected to do. And as your partner and as your neighbor. Thank you very much. I believe it is very important to underscore the regional vision and what you said about the before, the during, and the afternoon. After is key. There is a companionship, and if needed, there is also access. So this is information. All this information is very, very important. How to take advantage of the political or to tap this political will in order to open these spaces and to make all the necessary changes. And please remember questions for her. And now, the Institute of Human Rights, Carmen. Thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks for the invitation. I am Carmen Pedraza, and for 2 years I've been working for the Institute of Human Rights and Businesses. We are based on the United Nations, and we call it the IHRB. So I will be making reference to the Institute. I will be making a reference. I will refer to my institute as the institute, my organization. So the contribution of the institute to this type of dialogues comes from the experience we have working with big businesses and big businesses with huge supply chains. And in order to speak about this, I need to speak about the origin of the institute and the origin of the initiatives and how we want to keep creating business, creative ideas and the challenges What is the work of the Institute for Human Rights and for Businesses? I feel I need to speak about the origin of the Institute and how I came to it, because to me this is a dialogue with all the civil organizations working every day with those who are most affected by the supply chains. So when I want to explain the nature and this union we're trying to make between human rights and businesses, because we know that in some concepts people can even ask where how can you speak about human rights and businesses in the same sentence? And I will tell you how we are trying to do this. And I will tell you how I ended up in this institution. Many years ago, I studied communications and I wanted to be a journalist until you see that journalists get killed. So I decided to change my career. Always interested in the social impact topics. And as many of you, I started to work with civil organizations, with governments, Mexican representations, before international organizations. And this is when I saw the big gap and there is between the public sector and the sector of the civil organizations and the private sector. And by this gap, I mean the communications gap. Many times, the Mexican government, with the Mexican government, I saw how complex it was to participate in those sessions where the private sector has discusses all the improvements. So I decided to study even more, and I decided to study sustainability and social impact programs in order to understand what businesses say when they have these meetings and how to speak businesses. And this is how I ended up at this Institute for Human Rights and Businesses. And basically what the Institute is doing is precisely trying to close this gap and to take the stakeholders. Stakeholders means many things, or maybe nothing. So we wanted to work with the key stakeholders in order to leverage these actions and at the business level to have an impact on the business models and to be able to see that human rights should be part of the business models. It is not only one action that will have a positive social impact. In that action, there should be an integration that is taking human rights as a possibility. So we work with different programs, and we always try to bring to the table these different players. It includes people from government, people from financial organizations, and of course, communities of workers and representatives of businesses. There are different programs. My program is a program of migrating programs. We also have the just or fair transition, and it is important to work with all these different programs, and sometimes we forget to do so. There is another program of guilt environment, construction and guilt environment. I come from the migrant workers program. Now, what is our flag for this program? What is useful? Because when we take the different players and when we want to sit them and when we have to make the space to bring them together, it is important for us to facilitate this conversation. And we need to be certain that the same terms are being used and the similar languages are being used and how it is possible to make progress. Well, when speaking about the enforcement of rights of workers, and in this slide you're going to see the flag of the institute, where it is responsible recruitment. It is nothing new because we just had a very good panel about how important responsible recruitment is. And as one of the colleagues said, something important is that this is where the debt starts. And these are the new chains of modern slavery, because despite of the fact slavery was a physical chain, today chains are made up by money, by debt of these workers, and this is how labor exploitation starts and trafficking in persons. So we were focusing on the responsible recruitment, and as I said, it is because it is not only with all all the key stakeholders will understand. It will directly speak about business models. In all businesses, we should have recruitment, but we should also have a transition of how this recruitment is understood. So, how did we come to this? I will be speaking about the history of the program in this slide, as well as in our beautiful bags. You will find this theoretical framework that we created, that the institute created 11 years ago. Last year we celebrated its anniversary. This theoretical framework is like our cornerstone in the program, where we have the principles recommended for employers, something to be taken into consideration when being in the journey of the working migrant, because historically in a business model, it is understood that you have labor and then those are gone, and you do not understand that there was recruitment, a companionship, and the return. These are all the topics that we manage. And then we took principle one of the DACA principles. We call it the DACA principles because we created them in one session, in a panel, in a forum in Dhaka, in Bangladesh. There's no other reason to this. This is the place where they were created, and with the DACA principles, we took the recommendations. We also took recommendations to apply to enforce these rights. So we took the first principle, and I will remind you the conversation of Iberite. No cost will be paid by migrating workers, and it is a restriction, as we can clearly tell. Please give me two more slides. And there we develop the principle of the employers is going to pay. And by the way, it is a sticker. So I invite you to post it.
Donde justamente no, o sea, no, lo llevamos este principio un poco más allá, no solo de...
We took this principle beyond. It is not only to tell the employees what not to do, because we want them to know how to do things. It is not only a matter of telling them what to ban. Government should also be responsible. It sounds easy. It looks beautiful in a sticker, but businesses start to see there's something deeper in this implementation, because they saw that the recruitment cost goes beyond one person interviewing someone, and mainly with the supply chain where they work, where there is lots of labor coming from different places, and their need is for this labor coming from other places. So we have our cornerstone, which is the DACA principles, and from there we started to work with these principles of the employers, because it is speaking a lot to the business models, not only what not to do. And we started to see, and we started to develop other initiatives with the businesses, and we took responsible recruitment, and this is when we started to invite companies, those companies that want to participate, to create more initiatives. And this is how for the last 7 or 8 years we have had a recruitment, responsible recruitment leadership group. It doesn't mean this group represents the leaders in responsible. We're speaking about leading companies interested in developing initiatives for process. We just had McDonald's joining us a year ago, and this is, you can start to see how the graph is bigger and bigger because it is very difficult to work with medium-sized people and from global and transnational supply chains, huge ones. And then there was another bill or initiative to have the Global Forum for Responsible Recruitment. We go every year to different places, to different countries, and we do the mission of the institute, which is to take the stakeholders, the main stakeholders, in order to produce more initiatives and to make sure we all collaborate towards the same agenda. And this is where we took the base of this new tool, which is a registration of responsible and it started as one of our initiatives. We've seen that some of those restrict the cost. Instead of asking the employer to pay for it, we started to grow and work with all these materials and concepts. And people were asking for the list of recruiters. It has been published, and yes, I also need to have the list of produced by the government, which are the governments with these explicit policies. And it will not necessarily be okay to promote our work. And please, I ask you to please pay attention to it. But at the institute, we found this language and this key term in order to always work with businesses. This was the development that started here. And this, in the next slide, you're going to see some of the most results we are very proud of. All the leadership teams created this tool. This is a tool that specifically focuses on responsible recruitment. And in the next slide, I will not present them all. I would recommend it to you. I would love to have it in Spanish. We just look at it. This is recruitment. It is broken into steps, and companies used to ask, what is recruitment? And there you can see. I am kind of blind, but here we have the community of origin and the physicians, what they are required, return, and apart from apart from undoing this, it will also recommend you the best business practices, and it will also tell you which are the costs that you know have to be paid. And in this slide, for not to have excuses, because we have a lot of tools, but implementation is where the conversation becomes more complicated. And in each explicit step, there are tools you have to apply. And it is not an ultra-revolutionary tool. In some cases, it is like a checklist, and I believe the final tool when a migrant goes back to his place, it is a checklist. Ask if, have you ever lose sight of your passport? Did you ever lose your passport? Did you need to have another passport? This is a result of multiple initiatives, and we're very pleased to see that we were not the creators. It was the companies which are committed and those who need to be committed to this agenda, the creators, because they recognize and there is a sense of urgency, and this is something we need to take as an opportunity. They need to improve their responsible recruitment. They need to change their business models to eradicate, to clean their supply chains. The next slide, please. And now I will bring something to the table. And maybe you will jump, and please do so. Because here I am speaking about the responsible recruitment plan. This is something to be done with the businesses. with the table, and it is different from trafficking in persons. It is not that we should never speak about trafficking in persons. I would never make it an invisible concept, but there is a risk when we have seen this, we have seen this when we're dealing with someone who this is something we have heard, and we have heard it in those who have organized the responsible recruitment. Some weeks ago, we were meeting with a representative of a hotel chain, and we were asking us questions as well. And she told us, I cannot work with that specific entity because they only work with fighting trafficking in persons. So sometimes we see that people can easily be out of the issue. And what I am trying to say is that the risk behind the speaking about trafficking in persons is because the company can tell you, I adopted the Blue Heart campaign and all people in my hotels know this, but you are not actually telling, you are not saying that the business model, the one facilitating trafficking in persons, and this is why we use the responsible recruitment practice, and this is why I would like to say that we need to investigate when a company says, I do have my case against trafficking, because they can say that they are on your side. But we know that in those specific business models, trafficking in persons is very common. And this will mentioned in the previous panel in order to we need to see the will of the employer, and it is not a matter that we have overnight. It is because, as others have said, there is an overview across the region, all over the world, which are mandatory cases, sustainability cases. Why? Because if we have already spoken about innovative initiatives, the initiatives we're going to see will be innovative, and they are married to this, because sustainability, despite of the fact that it's understood, it is now being understood, and thanks to the environmental agenda, we need to see the social impact, despite of the fact we have environmental measures. And this is why it is easy to measure this agenda, because it is easier to move one CO2 ton, and it is going to be easier to measure the social impact. But we see that the environment impact should be considered holistically, and the dialogue we need to identify in order to keep talking to businesses is what is happening to this fair transition and rights of women programs, fair transition, and all the different topics we would like to move with. And we have also listened to several sustainability managers. The only way for many companies to start speaking about human rights is through and with the sustainability agenda. And this is the end of my comment. Thank you very much. Thanks, Carmen, for your perspective, and I believe what you said is important. Something that calls my attention is when you presented your scheme recruitment, measures exist in that journey, and this is what I believe it is important to think in these topics like this. Polaris, for example, speaking about trafficking in persons, we know that trafficking in persons is a continuum. It is not coming out of the blue. It is a result of conditions that are becoming more and more serious. So it is very important to speak about it. In this context, and now we will give the floor over to Margarita Nemecio from CECIG and the National Network of Agricultural Workers, and she has only 10 minutes. And please remember the intercultural approach of mechanisms. Thank you very much, Margarita.
Gracias, Diana.
Thanks,
Gracias a todas, todos.
Diana. Thanks
Y
to all of
bueno,
you.
justo va a ser la presentación en responder un poco porque creo que quedan
I want to somehow answer. There are many pending points, many points in the parking lot, and we want to speak about many concerns, and many times we speak about headaches and concerns that we have on this topic, and to answer the three questions in this session. What I did was to sit, and I was thinking when we were asked about the tools and the mechanisms. Some of them were already mentioned. I believe the majority of us know many, which are implemented at the level of organizations, at the different levels of local players or local stakeholders, but and at the different instances. And I will also focus and I will try to speak because I heard that in this space you're speaking about agricultural workers in the Mexican in the Mexican context. But we also have people in transit and those migrating to Mexico and to Canada, to the United States and to Canada. And I will be specifically speaking about those who are working in Mexico. And despite of the tools and actions and mechanisms, we still see institutional vacuums, and it is important to prioritize them. A while ago, I was talking to a friend, and as I already told you, what I am about to tell you is nothing new because we have shared the same problems in different spaces. And on the one hand, to always repeat that the tools need to be replaced and adjusted, it doesn't mean different practices should be enforced. But the empty spaces are still found because if we go to the communities and to the countryside, and when we work with the workers in Mexico, so we have to remember we need to make them visible, we need to recognize them. We have to remember the very difficult situation they face in the Mexican context, and if it is not seen as part of the context to justice tools and mechanisms, then the discourse and all the statements will remain a discourse, no specific action. And I will now retake one of them. When we speak about tools and mechanisms, something that has to do with the agricultural job inspections. And here we have these tools, which are very useful to prevent trafficking in persons and forced labor in the agricultural sector. The most important aspect is job inspections. This is necessary because it is a way to make it visible. We have the direct testimony of the people there. But if there is something failing on one side, it will not be only a good intention. We need to see what is the type of care, how we need to be able to identify those cases which are forced labor, trafficking, and the working children. Yes, we're speaking about the children, infants, teenagers, and I will speak about this because last October labor authorities met. And if you see the federal entities, they met in Yucatan and they presented the surveillance strategy at the job work sites, and they call it the Mayat Pact. And I will be speaking about it because it has been implemented as a place where 2,000 inspections are going to be made in job sites in 2024. And despite of the fact we see job centers, it is agricultural job sites, and despite of the fact that here we see information about children, we need to take a look at the different settings, which are the families of children and of young people. all the ones who are included in all these activities. And yes, there are going to be 2,000 inspections. How many in the countryside and the results? And if this has to do with the identification of forced labor or trafficking in persons. And for this strategy to happen, or the Mayasa part, to begin with, labor inspections should reinforce efforts in all federal entities with agricultural work, because we've seen that they only do ordinary and extraordinary inspections in those places where there are transnational companies and where they have intensive agriculture, but there are many other entities where the local authorities are the one doing live inspection, but there is no evidence, there is no way to strengthen mechanisms with other levels of instances. So it is very important to consider the national program. Now we have the budget for this year, but how to label it, because one argument is speaking about inspection is that there is not enough, there are not enough inspectors and there are no resources to do it. So it is very important to prioritize how resources are going to be allocated, and it is one of the strategies for this year. We need to make sure if the resource is going to be enough in order to carry out those 2,000 inspections, and this is another important point to do case follow-up and to be able to file a complaint. Once that I present some images, you're going to see why I am insisting on this. We also believe it is very important, but not only to give, but to implement mechanisms that will give labor trafficking victims and forced labor and labor exploitation, because what we've seen more is this exploitation and then trafficking and then forced labor. One is related to the other one, but sometimes it seems that we focus on one only, but since it is no trafficking, then no labor aspects are reviewed. There is no training, there is no information, so it is very important to think in terms of this, specifically in the case of the services rendered to people who are victims of labor trafficking and forced labor. They should have access to justice and or law enforcement. And when I speak about adequate services, we see that in the context of people working in the countryside, many cases we have people, indigenous people, people coming from rural places, and in order to file a complaint, it's something about labor exploitation. Remember, there are people who cannot even read or write, and maybe they understand some words in Spanish, but not all of them. The use of technical words, it is present in every design, in every strategy, and how can we make people have access to information? We want them to be able to speak about forced labor, trafficking in persons, because there are people who make labor exploitation normal to speak about the scale of work. This is a word that could be even difficult to understand, so we need to take all this into consideration. If not, how are we going to implement a protocol of how can we take care of the victims if we do not understand what we mean by population, other needs? And this is something, this is part of the challenge, because it is important when we speak about the design and when we speak about the intercultural, it should be cross. Sometimes it is parallel and elements are taken. And yes, we say we need to take into consideration the indigenous people, but when you are in the place, there are no translators, there are no interpreters, and if I need to file a complaint, people are asked to go to different places. If something happens in remote places, they need to stop working one day, and then they need to invest their own resources to go to those places and to be able to identify if they're going to be speaking about exploitation or trafficking in persons or an infringement of a general human right. This is part of the intercultural approach. If we only speak about the indigenous people, then it should be more strategic. And as part of the challenges, Yes, and in order to close this presentation,
Ahí era parte como de las descripciones.
here we have the descriptions.
Creo que estaba la pregunta de retos.
And there was a question on challenges. It is important to have information, and this information needs to see all the actions taking place within the framework of inspections, because sometimes it is complicated. We know inspections happen, but sometimes it is difficult to know which were the cases identified, which were the actions, which was the treatment, if actions were implemented with an intercultural approach, but also taking care of the victims. There is very little information. The inspection was made, this was the scope, and there is nothing that will allow us to identify what we see in the protocol. Another thing is the registry of agricultural places or sites. There are some lists in internet and other at the government level, but not all the companies are registered, and sometimes in the different agricultural cycles, the names change, and we have front names, and in this type of list, we do not see small producers and other producers with these characteristics, and if there is no basic registry for the design of the implementation, actions will be limited, and the only thing that happens is that crimes will happen, crimes that have to do with labor, trafficking. The implementation of actions should, yes, we can speak about economic or administrative sanctions, but we need to see what is the follow-up. Would you please go to another slide? For example, this, what you see there. Look at the last three. Two are the same case, and were last year situations, and there were news about this, and there's information about this, and these cases were trafficking in persons, labor trafficking, there was forced labor, there were cases with children. They were in one of the agricultural places. Which were the actions? The actions were to simply give the resource so that people could go back to Chihuahua. When you see the case, there were no translators, and this word that is very difficult for me, and I reject it when speaking about this topic. Actions are always we rescue. We shouldn't be speaking about rescue if inspections were closely related in order to identify this type of actions, and the actions of the protocols should be implicit in order to identify them. All these cases, we know about all these cases because there was a complaint by the worker. They were not rescued. There were actions, but after the case, and there were some strategies, there were some delays, but not everything was implemented because they do not have the protocols. And my concern, and it has to do with the topic of needs, and I will end with this. You see the very first one, 1998, look at this, 80 workers were rescued. And if you make numbers, it is a 26-year difference. And this is why I told you when you sit and speak about it, in 1998, they were speaking about 80 people. And in 2023, in January and in July, 80 and 42 workers in the same situation. Not only in one place, there are many places with the same characteristics and situations. Before 1998, this was happening. But why is it that in 26 years, what has happened? Yes, we need to speak about trafficking, but what is there? Why is it that in 26 years we have this notes? Let's see what is ahead of us in 2024. And now I will close by saying that whatever is designed, whatever is implemented, these tools and these mechanisms, it is always to think in terms of these mechanisms, to see them and considering the needs of the workers, because many of these things are being designed with what I visualize, what I think should be strategic, my alternatives, without asking them, and we take for granted that what we're about to implement is going to bring an immediate answer. And if this is the case, the gender approach, intercultural approach, human rights approach, and children approach, none of this will be transversal, considering the protocols and the tools or the mechanisms. It is possible to simply state them, but that is not enough, and this is what is so important, to have this relationship with the civil society. There are documents, and with the different players and with the different international entities, academia, authorities of different levels, they should have a way to strengthen, to visualize that situations happen in Mexico, so that it is possible to improve this type of tools and mechanisms. Thank you so much. Thanks so much. The importance of speaking about the context. This is very important, to look at the experiences of all these workers. This is key in all we do and how to take this vision. So in order to continue, we will continue with Merari. Can you hear me? Yes. I know we are kind of tired. I brought lots of information, but I want to thanks to all my colleagues for their comments, and I will speak about things that haven't been said while we're doing this international organization for migrations. For those who do not know this, we belong to the United Nations. I will not stop on what is this organization, and like many other agencies, as we can tell by the name, our mandate is focused on the migration context, not only migrant people in Mexico, but also to and from Mexico, and those people coming back to Mexico. So you can imagine where we work today. It is 10 offices. We are an agency that is
aumentando de manera
exponentially working. We are about to have a new office in another state. Obviously, this is respond to the domestic context. It is nothing new. Migration, it is always changing. We're speaking about different profiles, different nationalities, people from Ukraine, from Venezuela, from Syria, from many different places. There's always big diversity. And the domestic setting of Mexico, all this is making us face changes and innovation to produce answers that will respond to the needs and the context. We know that the topic of 2024, the structural and political changes, these are all very complex things for all people here. As you know, we are an international organization. We are based on the World Pact for Migration. We deal with different aspects, and one of the main ones is labor migration. The next one, please. I will be speaking about the challenges. We have spoken about this, and based on some of the challenges we have identified with some of our methodologies, the BPM. I invite you to review our internet website. It is a methodology we use to do the tracking, to track the migration flows in Mexico. It is a constant ongoing review of all these flows that change, and all this information is compiled every month. We may produce a new report every month, and these are the different profiles of people. There is also a labor profile. We have the challenges of people, and we want to contribute. We want to the non-existing data. To be honest with you, we need much more information on what is not possible to be seen. It doesn't exist. No one speaks. There are no specific answers. I would like to tell you what I do, where I work. I work for different projects, labor migration topics, as I already told you, something important. In the past, the organization was working more at the international level, people arriving, but in recent times it works with all people, and this human development in my area. We have different projects. I will not be speaking about all of them. I only would like to speak about the very specific results, speaking about agricultural results. The next one, please. The next one, please.
Algunas de las cosas que
Some of the
realizamos
things we
sobre
do,
múltiples temas
multiple
migración
topics,
laboral,
always
está enfocado
labor
evidentemente
migration,
en el departamento
obviously
ético, ahora
ethical
muy fuertemente
recruitment,
con comentarios
and now yesterday we had a meeting on
amplio,
financial
sobre todo muy
inclusion.
escaso en el tema
Very
de las
little
personas
information when speaking about the agricultural and migrating
sobre ese tema
people,
también.
workers. I will give you some information. Diaspora and
es una
remittances.
oportunidad perdida para
It is a
México,
lost
ahora,
area of
también es otro país
opportunity,
con
knowing
mayores
that
sobrepeso
today
del mundo, nos faltamos a China,
we have
los
more
no tienen
remittances
acceso
than
y sobre todo
China,
son las personas
and people do
ya
not have access to
consolidamos y que son las
financial
personas
services, and we know that it is mainly those doing agricultural work. They are the ones receiving these remittances, but through other means. It is not necessarily through financial services. The people have the right to entrepreneurship, and we also work closely with the National Job or Employment Service and with other institutions to promote what I said at the beginning, to have access, to have people knowing where to go in order to have actual job proposals and how to have access to all those opportunities. I will also be speaking about women in the labor market. We've been speaking about visibilization, the different groups, not to have all people in the same sack, all people. We should also take into consideration the agricultural approach, and we need to speak about the different needs, the different groups. In this case, women. We're working with the National Institute of Women, and we are also working in terms of visibilization of the migrating entrepreneurship. This is something new, and in the case of migrants, mainly, in many cases, we speak about the sources of income. Who are they? And in the case of women, for example, their first source, and those who come along with men working for the agricultural sector, the first source of income is formal activities, and how can we offer access to the other people. In the private sector, we are working in every aspect. We also have labor justice, also something very, very important, what the organizations do. Here we have some of our alliances. And here, one of the most important things, and I apologize for this slide because it has lots of words, but I would like to speak about the two initiatives, two actions by the organization. Speaking about the agricultural sector. On the one hand, we were working with labor channeling and the labor mobilization programs. We were working with the private and with the public sector in order to identify this, all the efforts being made and to be able to take all these efforts and to know what is the process of the ethical process and how institutions and the organizations can identify the roles, because sometimes it looks easy but it is not that easy. So it is part of what we analyze and through labor mobility programs. And we're working with the Canadian government in order to create new mechanisms between Mexico and Canada for migrants, Mexican migrants, where there is an ethical recruitment process guaranteed. On the other hand, and I believe this is going to be very interesting because we haven't spoken about the southern border, we haven't speaking about the northern border. So we know there are many things which are missing. There are some mechanisms which are not that effective, others which are not necessary, others which are necessary. But in our case, one of our main uncertainties was to speak about a card given to agricultural workers, specifically in the coffee and banana plantations in the southern part of Mexico, mainly to people from Guatemala. This is the target group in the southern border of Mexico. These are the results that I will be sharing with you. These are some of the studies, and I will be very pleased to share this with you and to speak about agricultural things. The next one, please. One of the standards, the one that is precisely based on the DACA principles, is the International Society of Migrations. We have the IRIS standard, and here evidently the principles and pacts and international agreements. So we have seven principles. I will not go deeper into them because evidently they answer what we've been asking, and to have ethical recruitment processes and having access to information and rights and the empowerment. And we also spoke about the creation of remediation mechanisms. This is we also have access to justice and how can people have access to restitution mechanisms. It needs to happen before. This is something very important because migrants, for example, not only the international ones, but all migrants, it is not common for them to have this information before they have a new job, and we need to make a commitment. They need to make a commitment with the employers, and it is an empowering process.
Tenemos un proyecto, esto es algo de lo que más les quería hablar.
This is something that I wanted to tell you. The name of this project is based on this standard, and it is the agriculture and food industry. The idea of the project is to identify all the initiatives, challenges, and areas of opportunity of the public and private sector in order to include those migrating workers into the food sector in Mexico, as well as those Mexican people who migrate to other states within Mexico, or even to abroad. The next one, please.
La que sigue.
The next one, please.
La que sigue.
The next one, please.
En los estados de implementación de este proyecto,
in the implementation states of this project, we have them in colors. On the one hand, as I already told you, we have people coming, we have people from the south, something very important through the use of the TBTF, but we know they will not always use this card. Many times, unfortunately, people will be in the regular sector, and we also have we also pay attention to the issue in workers going to the United States and even to other states up in the northern part of Mexico, Baja California, for example. And here we're speaking about the results and how to improve all these public policies, but the local answer, and we know that the national answer is complex in this characterization. In each state, we have done a scouting in each one of the states. We have visited the different parts, government, local at the local state level, and the relationship with the Ministry of Culture at the state level and the relationship with other states. And it's necessary to have work plans at the local level, focus on the needs and the authorities. We know that evidently the main idea is the protection of working people because they are the ones who are facing these vulnerabilities. But the situation is to address and to tell which are the needs and the institutional needs at the local level, because apart from the strengthening of capacities, people also speak about the need for infrastructure, political awareness, and drug trafficking, for example.
No es lo mismo la situación que están viviendo en Yucatán que la que están viviendo en Guerrero. Entonces, justamente en respuesta a esto, lo que estamos haciendo es creando planes para
So what we do is to create plans for the different states in order to guarantee and to identify the key institutions. And our role is involvement of institutions in order to enforce rights of people in their context. In the case of the southern border states, to be able to use the card in the case of migrants and in the case of domestic migrants, displacement, to make sure the rights happen through contracts. And those who migrate from Mexico to be knowledgeable.
Y también esta coordinación, mesas de coordinación con las instituciones públicas, ¿no?
Sessions with public, with the relevant public institutions.
Y ya para terminar, les tengo este estudio de la tarjeta.
I want to share with you this study.
A mediados finales del año pasado, este estudio nos dimos cuenta que a pesar de que es una de las
we saw that it is one of the few tools we have, and this is towards migration regularization, but not much information is available. We only know about the use of the card. The use is significantly getting less and less, and it will have an impact on the pandemic, and we haven't seen a recovery. So I know that I think that many of you know about the migration regulation journeys or pathways, but you also know that there are some not everything is there is not only one solution. So we have identified several challenges when speaking about the use of this card, and this was something for public institutions, because we need to know if this is the good way to do migration regularization. What is the need to use these programs, not only administrative instruments, but to include all this so that we can guarantee rights, contracting, and to guarantee recruitment, circular migration. And people from Guatemala, for example, we saw some challenges. We know the cost, and this is nothing new. In the agricultural sector, for example, there we have data, and we pay the minimum wage. People make the minimum wage, and sometimes even less. We have the topic of women. In the survey we did, no woman is making the minimum wages. TBT BF users. We also have the interinstitutional coordination, evidently. Not only the Mexican government and border states and the government of Guatemala, they do not know the rights that those people what will happen in the case in the countries of destination, in this case Mexico, public agenda and the responsibility, co-responsibility with the government, and to have an adequate communications strategy, not only for migrants, because this is what where we have worked a lot. We invite you to review our communications campaign. Speaking about TBTF, talking to people, but then we decided that we needed to have a campaign for public institutions. I was so terrified when I knew about what happens in Guatemala, the need of information, the empowering of people. Empowering people, it should be done with the civil society organizations. We cannot work very hard, but public institutions are the ones responsible for guaranteeing those rights. And it has to do with the standards. Those who are responsible for guaranteeing rights. Here we're speaking about public service, and we knew about these areas of opportunity. So how can we be with these processes, with this information, so that we can make a co-responsibility chain? And there you have some areas of opportunity to promote information, to use the different networks. There we have the need. We have several platforms, but I believe through the civil society organizations, it would be a good way to do it, to promote the advantages of the car through the private sector. There we have several data about the advantage of private institutions to guarantee when guaranteeing and when having formal contracts for migrating workers, mainly in the agricultural sector, because this is where it is more difficult to see this informality. The next one, please. I only would like to thank you all for paying attention, for being here. And this diagnosis is about to be published in our platform, and the idea of having this type of studies is to be able to speak about institutions which are planning and which are supporting the different migrating workers and institutions in order to have more effective and strategic planning processes so that we can enforce these rights. Because if we work only in one area, it will always be very difficult. So we need to have a more comprehensive look, which are the tools that already exist. And we should also determine how we can promote the protection of workers.
Muchísimas gracias, Merari. Creo que algo que me resuena, ¿no? Un poco en las diferentes intervenciones.
Something that I see in the different presentations is that to know, to understand the contexts for the implementation. Without that, it is difficult to attain the goals we want to attain, and this is part of the conversation. How do we maximize the use of tools, the different perspectives? I believe it is a very important conversation to take these frameworks and to see it and to see the reality the realities that people face.
Con eso abrimos el espacio.
Now we're going to open the space and raise your hand if you have questions. Let's start here. There was one final comment in the previous session. Good afternoon. My name is Nubia Diaz and I come from the Union of Agricultural Workers in WhatsApp in the state of Sinaloa. I'm speaking about the comments by the panelists. I'm speaking about what Margarita said. In Sinaloa, we have lots of indigenous people, workers, and they have to pay to make it all the way to Sinaloa to work. So they have to pay, and they are also discriminated if they are women, even more discrimination. They come to work to Sinaloa, they have to pay, they pay very high amounts. And we're also seeing another phenomenon, which is indigenous single mothers who work in the country. In the past, this didn't happen up in the north. Women came with their complete families, parents, grandparents, but now we see single mothers with twice the number of problems because after the climate conditions, their children will immediately get sick and it becomes pneumonia. So authorities do not see this. Authorities do not see this till the case is over. Every week we have different cases. We have aberrant situations, and I'm very sad to see that Sinaloa is not prepared to receive them. But yes, it is prepared to become richer because those hands are productive hands, and it is very important to look at them. We're working with them. We work with them. We organize workshops. But it is a lot of work to do, and we need to have the support of the society. And because of that, those children who stay with the older, they are not over 10. And then sometimes they do not even know how to speak Spanish. A year ago, there was a girl buried right next to a sewage system. They found the mother, and the mother was not speaking Spanish, and she was sentenced, and then she was found dead. How come she was taken to trial if she was not even able to speak Spanish?
Hola, hola, ¿me escuchan? Buenas tardes, mi nombre es...
Hi, are you listening to me? My name is Daniela Gomez and I come from the Ministry of the Interior in representation of the Technical Commission, and we are in charge of the implementation of the National Program Against Trafficking in Persons. And I would like to take information. There are some things we can say first. INEGI has a percentage of 55.1% of the population. So I believe this is the main problem we have. More than 50% of our economy, is informal economy. So the role of the job work inspection is very, very important. And we know that labor, it is not possible to work in these informal spaces. So this is the very first challenge. So we need to try to increase the formal economy, and we need to explore some policies and programs so that we can be within the inspections. In this informal sector. On the other hand, we speak about improvements to the public policies or absent public policies. It is real, and it has to do with something we all know, and this is something we see even more, which is the ongoing rotation of public officers. It is not possible to follow this up, and obviously there is no sustainability of all these programs and projects. There is good progress at the country level, but in the public service, we need to make all these projects sustainable, to continue with them and to follow them up. On the other hand, we believe we need to reinforce the responsibility or accountability by the employers. So let's make socially responsible companies, and let's increase the sanctions. Let's increase this accountability. Undoubtedly, it is necessary. The awareness of the private sector. We were speaking about training, and in the different sessions we had in 2023, we need to we need to have an awareness campaign. For example, in the hotel sector, we've been working with the national strategy, training the hotel sector, and the code of national code of conduct, and they are open to training. But we also ask. We ask presenters to not only speak about how to tackle trafficking in persons cases, we need to also speak and employees, and they should all know which their services are, and how to see which are the different behaviors. And last but not least, something we say in the Mexican government, and something we have identified, because if we do not make the situations visible, we will not be able to make more progress. And the Mexican government cannot work alone. We cannot work alone, and we need to have these alliances and this coordination with every sector, public, private sectors, the civil society, and international entities. And something we said in Sinaloa, we had many areas of opportunities, and we knew what was happening in many cases. And a civil society organization, we knew about this case. We have worked with the ministries of state ministries, and this is when this started. We know the best processes are not available, but it was thanks to a specialized prosecutor's office that it was possible to identify the cases. So what happens in those cases? There is competence by the investigative authority, but then we need to investigate what is happening. Is there a rescue process? But on the other hand, these people went back to Chihuahua. I do not know if all of them, but these people were coming from a forced displacement. So they were taken back to the place of origin where they were suffering violence. So the states should have the capacity to retain people and to give them more opportunities. So these authorities know how to take care of the victims of this crime. So I believe there are many areas of opportunity, lots of food for thought. And this, we love these spaces where we can all gather and to remember that yes, things happen, but we have a big challenge ahead of us.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Manuel Olvera, and I represent Rainforest Alliance Mexico, and I work in collaboration with Angelica Barrera from Stronger Together. It is an initiative that is to be completed this year, and I only would like to share with you two thoughts after listening to you, and I believe it is very valuable to bring it now. Something that I would like to say is that we were speaking about a social dialogue, where it is very important to include supermarkets, those big commercial chains, which are, by the end of the day, are the ones buying the products of those companies with which we work today. Companies are always complaining about this unloyal competition. They say the products they produce is in the supermarket, but we also have find other products without no compliance. So they are now trying to get a certification, but when you find them in the market, the same product is found. And the other one without complying with the regulations. So who shall we talk to? Where shall we include the commercial chains so that they listen to all these realities and they make the effort we're making in this change process? I always emphasize the companionship process, what we offer to companies. We need to underscore the content that has to be very well adapted, and in the right context we have lots of tools, and I am listening to what has been presented. Obviously, we also produce manuals, policies, but I believe it is very important to speak about how to make it to bring it to the correct context. It is not the meaning of labor exploitation or trafficking in persons. They need to understand how labor exploitation looks like in the field, forced labor. And this is something that we have mentioned many, many times. We have real case situations of audits and how this type of findings can be treated, the non-conformances. And as Margarita said, this is all inclusive. It is not possible to speak about these concepts in isolation. So it is very important to emphasize and something, or to end, something we have also seen in this project is that in the agricultural sector, despite of the fact companies are working to strengthen capacities, we still see the very low level of diagnosis or self-diagnosis to know the areas of opportunities, So it is not only a matter of presenting them these concepts. They within their organizations, they cannot tell which are the areas where they need to work, and the material we produce is available to you all.
Creo que vi varias preguntas.
Several questions.
Un poco el tiempo. Creo que nos falta.
Time is over. What we need is more time.
Fueron dos acá, acá de este lado bien. Si quieren, hacemos una de este lado, Claudia. Breves y podemos.
One here, Claudia. Can we make those two comments and then let's move to this side?
Yo más que
Well, more than
sin duda creo que todo lo que hemos hablado es
unquestionably what we have said is very important. All we have said is important. I only would like to say that Polaris is also working in Mexico, and our project here in Mexico has been very focused on the detection and prevention, obviously, of labor exploitation. Trafficking. Polaris is a civil society organization from the United States, and the reason why it is working in Mexico is because many calls are coming to the national hotline. People from we see the need
de información sobre
the national line. There is lots of information and questions about labor rights and information about trafficking. I believe in Mexico, not only in the cities, but in general terms, information is needed on labor rights, and this is precisely what we are trying to do in Polaris, and this is why we created this platform. It is a multi-platform, intercultural platform, and the aim is to communicate, to talk to agricultural workers. Intercultural, this is a very important word because we see that there are many, many indigenous agricultural workers who do not necessarily speak Spanish, and we want to bring them information in their own languages. So it is very important to organize this type of proposals or to do it at the places of origin. It is something very, very important. And we want to be able to make a bigger network with the baseline organizations, and I hope there are other baseline organizations that can join us so that we can keep working in intercultural responses, and we want them to have access to justice.
Muchas gracias. Yo solamente quería expresar
Thanks. I only would like to express
acuerdo con lo que dijo
that I fully agree with Margarita. I fully agree with her about the lack of labor inspections at the job sites. In Jornaleros, we have seen that a year ago, last year, despite of there was a growth in the number of employees with IMSS, but we also saw an increase in the number of exports, agricultural field workers without these benefits. And one of the reasons why there was an increase first in the payment of IMSS, one reason is the labor. Yes, what happens in exporting agricultural companies. We identified that these inspections were just on big size facilities, standardized with labor agreements with the big companies. And we saw that medium and small size producing ranches, there was deficient labor inspection, and this is precisely where we found more infringement of labor workers, of agricultural workers, the infringement of more infringement of more rights. We don't have enough time. I am Juan José Baniegos, Movimiento Cultural. I come from the state of Veracruz. I was saying that the focal point should be companies. Companies should be the focal point, and this is what I see in the different comments. We should participate. Yes, we should participate, but the main trigger would be a company, for example, doing due diligence. What we see there, when we see lots of people working in all the places you have mentioned, you see it is a chain of mafia, and there's no way to be there. That is something clear to me. My question is, a general company that doesn't investigate how a worker comes to her company becomes an accomplice of trafficking because of not investigating. It could also be someone who is already exploited. And the last question is, what do you think about the national survey of employment. Is it working or isn't it working? What we see today is that there are many workers that want to have the H2A. They are paying more. They were paying up to 30,000, but now they are paying up to 200,000 because they're going to jump trespass on the National Employment Service. Doesn't work, and this is what we know. So, what do you think about the National Job or Employment Service?
Estamos cortos en tiempo, lo guardamos para el final, hacemos tu intervención.
We have two more here. Here. Good afternoon. My name is Sadid Matias Juan. I am part of the National Political Assembly of Indigenous Women and member of the National Network of Interpreters and Translators of Indigenous Languages. We do indigenous translation and interpretation to have access to justice. So if you need a translation or interpretation service, please be in touch with us, and we also have an internet website so that we can we even work with the courts in the United States, in Texas, in New Jersey, in Florida, because there is a phenomenon now related to migration and mobility of indigenous people going to agricultural spaces and the networks of organized crime and trafficking in persons. These bring indigenous language-speaking people, and in the case of the U.S. government, it is very difficult to have interpreters who speak indigenous people. They have to set people free. It is something that is becoming more and more common. And speaking about the identity of indigenous women, we speak about migration, and we see how migrating populations are seen only as the labor force. They are not seen as a person with a community. Sometimes they own lands, but their lands are abandoned because the economic model doesn't allow them to produce, not even for self-consumption, because remember in the past, Oaxaca, Chiapas, Guerrero, those are producing states, and farmers produce for self-consumption. Nowadays, and even with the public policies and with the Sembrando Vida program, mono crops are increasing. In the central valleys in Oaxaca, only maguey is being harvested because mezcal is what sells more, and there's no corn, there's no there are no beans, and this biodiversity is being affected by the economic model. And at the end of the day, we have to pay for every service. If we want to go to school, we have to pay. If we want to have medical services, whatever we want and need in our community, we need to pay for that. So I believe what is not sustainable is this economic model that is affecting and taking the possibility away from people. They do not have the possibility to produce the food they consume. And we have this big production chains that will take everything away from you, and you will simply become labor. So I believe this is how we can change the perspective.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much.
Perdona insistencia, pero yo no me quedo para la siguiente mesa.
I will have to leave, but first I want to thank you for the presentation. I am Rita Robles. I defend labor, human rights. And as you said, another big problem is the lack of social value of agricultural work, and how are we going to value this work and it has to do with the food sovereignty and right to health. If we do not take a comprehensive approach, there are going to be many gaps, and it seems that the policies are taking different pathways. This is on one hand, and on the other hand, how we see migration. We see migration from a crisis perspective, or as a problem, or as a phenomenon. It is a reality that we're going to face. There is no way out, and we need to establish measures. So I believe something important is the scope, and if we are still speaking about the undocumented migrant and irregularities, we're going to be speaking about the same, so migration and worker. These are topics which are closely related, yes, but access to work and the enforcement of labor rights has nothing to do with my condition as a migrant. I need my labor in order to survive. So let's speak about migrating workers, and then they're going to be speaking about rights and the obligations of the state to protect and to guarantee, to enforce rights, and to speak about justice. So everything depends on the scope. And if I want to treat it as something related to rights, I was just looking for the information. Comarcel. This year there are 141,000 applications for asylum, but it was more than 200,000 people who were arrested, and this is going to be growing. Are visas enough? No, there will never be enough because the number of people coming out. And we need to see what is going to happen to Mexico if Mexico decides. So we keep speaking about a visa. Let's not speak about ethics, because if what about the criminal presence, and if there are only a few possibilities, let's not speak about the ethical and the criminal side. And this is something I wanted to also express. And last but not least, speaking about companies, it is the responsibility of the state. If Margarita says the inspections, it is compliance, but inspection needs also the sanction process. So let's speak about corruption, Margarita, because they are inspectors are corrupt. If we do not speak about corruption, and if we do not speak about this, when speaking about working conditions and protection by these governments and by others, we're going to be in a phase. And something that I would like to also say is that we do not know our rights. And even less countryside workers, they in general terms, they know nothing about, they know less. Do you know your right to unionize? Let's strike to see if companies change, and it is a problem because it is an individual hiring or process. People are not allowed to legally organize without unions. There is no social dialogue, because if we speak about the social dialogue, government only recognizes those unions which are legally constituted. So we are adversaries, so we need to say things the way they are. Promotion, enforcement of rights, and let's help them organize so that we can properly speak about health, education, housing. That's all I wanted to say, and I apologize. Thank you very much. One final comment. Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Jaime Romay, and I am the director and the founder of Unico Films. I was invited to attend and to witness and to be here. And it is my honor to listen to all of you, the different initiatives and what you are achieving, doing. We are filming, we are developing a movie where we're going to be speaking about domestic migration from indigenous communities and the problem that the country faces, the countryside faces. And I just wanted to introduce myself. And for me, as a filmmaker, it is important to participate in this movement and to use the film industry as a communications mean to make the problem visible. And it is not only to make the problem visible and to also make those who work visible, to find a solution. And I want to invite you all to participate, to find a way to make alliances. It's been 3 years of development. This window, which is Vicine, we are bringing the project into the fiscal stimulus, and we have a team of filmmakers, very high-end filmmakers. So we want to invite people to live where the migrants face, and to somehow help create this relationship with the society, with Mexican people who do not know what is actually happening in our country. It is very important to have the participation of all of you in this. I will share our information with you so that we can be in touch and to see how we can make it happen. This is the end of this session. As you can see, we see how are we going to look at it. I believe that if we are not thinking in terms of, if we do not think in terms of the different contexts and the realities, the way they are, not as we imagine them. I would like to thank you all for being part of this dialogue, and I believe this is the beginning of a long conversation. So let's give you all a round of applause. Thanks to all of you. Thanks for your participation. We have one more session. We're going to have a 10-minute break. Would you please register? Or, yes.